After my daughter trashed my $118,000 Christmas gift, I taught her the ultimate lesson in value. She wanted a minimalist home, so I gave her exactly what she asked for: an empty room and a 48-hour eviction notice. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The wrapping paper hit the floor, a heap of red and gold that had cost me 20 minutes of careful folding. Expensive stuff, the kind that doesn't tear easily. I watched my daughter Bula stare at the painting I had just unveiled. Her nose wrinkled exactly like it did whenever she opened a carton of milk 3 weeks past its due date. My living room had never felt colder. It was worse than the winter of 2021 when the heating died, and I had to wear 2 sweaters for a week just to keep my blood moving. "Dad, what is this?" Bula asked. "It is a painting," I said, keeping my voice as level as a carpenter's shelf. "A French landscape from the 1890s. I thought you would appreciate the depth." She turned the canvas sideways, squinting at the dark oils as if looking for a hidden defect. "It looks so old," she muttered. "It looks like something you'd find at a garage sale." Her husband Thaddeus glanced up from his phone. He had been scrolling through his feed since they arrived, barely acknowledging the breakfast I had spent since 6 a.m. preparing. Finally, he said, looking at Beulah, "Babe, be nice. It is the thought that counts." "The thought of what?" Beulah snapped. "Our living room looking like a retirement home?" "We are doing minimalist now, Thaddeus. Clean lines, white walls. This thing is just cluttered." I looked at the table. The croissants were cooling. Much like my paternal affection, at least the croissants could be reheated. I had perfected that cinnamon roll recipe over 40 years, and the coffee beans in the grinder cost more per pound than the fake Rolex on Thaddeus's wrist. They had come downstairs at 10 a.m., yawning and complaining about being tired, while the food I made for them sat untouched and ignored. Bula had opened the other gifts first. There was a cashmere scarf, a designer handbag, and gift cards to boutiques I could not even pronounce. She had thanked me for those with a polite, distant smile, the kind you give a waiter when he brings the check. But the painting was different. "I purchased this piece in 1994 from a private collection," I said, measuring my words. "It has been in my bedroom for 30 years. "That is nice, Dad," Bula said. She leaned the frame against the couch, not even bothering to set it upright. "But we can't use it. Maybe you could donate it to Goodwill. You know, get a tax write-off and let someone else enjoy it. Someone with that kind of taste." I looked at the canvas. I had paid $12,000 for that painting in 1994. In today's money, that was roughly $40,000. But I was the only one in the room doing that math. Thaddeus smiled at me, a thin, useless expression that did not reach his eyes. "Corn, you have to understand," Thaddeus said. "Our aesthetic is very different. Boomers love this old school stuff, but it just doesn't fit our vibe. No offense, man. It is just a generational thing." Upstairs, my grandson Braxton screamed. I could not tell if it was a video game victory or a massacre. My granddaughter Kelafina responded with equal volume. They were present in the house, yet completely absent from the room. "Honestly, Dad, maybe you should just keep it in your studio," Bula said, checking her phone. "It is more your vibe anyway." I stood up and picked up the painting. The frame felt heavier than I remembered, a solid weight against my chest. "Yes, I think I will," I said. "Great, problem solved," Bula said, her face brightening instantly. "Can we eat now?" "I am starving." Thaddeus frowned as I turned to leave. "Hey, Corn, you okay?" "You are being weird." "I am fine," I said. "Enjoy your breakfast." "It is probably cold by now." Beulah wrinkled her nose again at the plates on the table. "We should probably just order something fresh," she whispered to Thaddeus. I walked down the hall to my studio, passing photographs that neither of them had looked at in 3 years. Family photos, history, mine. I stepped inside and the door clicked shut, sealing out the sound of their complaints. I set the painting on my desk where the morning light hit it perfectly. The lavender fields of Provence glowed in purple and gold, oil and time frozen in a perfect moment. Armand Guillaumin had painted this in 1892. His brushstrokes were confident, intentional, and famous. The art world treasured his work. My daughter thought it was garage sale trash. My hands did not shake as I pulled my phone from my pocket. I scrolled through my contacts until I hit a name I had not called in years. Flossie McCoy. Sotheby's. My thumb hovered for 2 seconds, then I tapped the screen. Cornelius Harrison, she said on the second ring. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Flossie, I said. Listen, I have something for your January auction, something special. I looked at the lavender fields as they seemed to shimmer in the light. How does next week sound? The painting sat in my passenger seat on January the 2nd, buckled in with more care than Bula had shown it in years. Santa Fe glittered under a cold, bright sun as I parked on Canyon Road. I lifted the package and walked toward the brass handles of the auction house. A gallery owner named Marcus nodded as I passed. We had appraised a collection together back in 2018. Coming here felt like coming home. Flossie met me in the lobby wearing the same sharp blazer and reading glasses on a chain that she had worn for 2 decades. She looked like she could authenticate a Rembrandt in her sleep. Cornelius Harrison, she grinned. Is that what I think it is? Depends on what you were thinking, I said. She led me to an examination table and unwrapped the canvas. Her hands stopped moving the second the lavender fields were exposed. I am thinking a Guillaumin, 1890s Provençal landscape. I am thinking you have been holding out on us. It was a gift, I said. The recipient did not appreciate it. Then the recipient is a fool, Flossie replied. The examination took 30 minutes. She used UV light and magnification, checking the signature and the canvas weave while I stood by. She checked all the things Bula had never bothered to ask about. Flossie made notes on her tablet, checking recent market comparisons for Guillaumin's work. I have the provenance, I said. Private auction, 1994, estate of the Duchamp family. Museum quality controlled environment for 30 years. The market for him is strong right now, Flossie said, looking up. I am thinking 6 figures. A conservative estimate is $100,000 to $120,000. I remembered that 1994 auction in New York. Most people saw a decent landscape, but I saw the brushwork where purple met gold in exactly one way. Guillaumin's way. I had bid $12,000 and won. I had brought it home and hung it where I could see it every morning. You have good taste, Flossie smiled, and patience. What changed? I tried to pass it along, I said. It did not work out. She did not push. She prepared the consignment papers, 3 pages of a standard contract. My hand moved to sign, then stopped for a heartbeat. Should I tell Bula first? The thought lasted half a second before my pen moved across the paper. No second thoughts? Flossie asked. None, I said. Do you want the sale to be confidential? We can keep it out of the public catalog. No need, I said. I assumed Bula would never see an auction catalog. She did not read them. She did not care about art. It was an interesting mistake. On January 9th, while Flossie was filing the final papers for the winter collection, Bula was across town at a trendy Canyon Road cafe. She was stirring a latte with Zenobia Wallace, a woman who carried a designer bag and wore $300 sunglasses indoors. Your dad is still upset about Christmas, Zenobia said. He is being ridiculous, Bula shrugged. It was just some old painting, dark brown and very antique looking. Not our style at all. Thaddeus's voice crackled through the speakerphone on the table. He has been weird all week, Z. He won't return my calls. He is getting old. Bula tapped her temple. Maybe a little senile. We should make sure Korn is protected, Thaddeus said, in case his judgment is slipping. He lives alone in that big house making financial decisions. We should be involved. I was unaware of their conversation as I walked into the Sotheby's auction room that same afternoon. I wore my gray suit and a bow tie. The room smelled of money and old oil. I sat in the back row as Lot 47 came up. Armand Guillaume, the auctioneer announced. Opening bid, $60,000. Paddles rose instantly, $70,000, $80,000. The phone lines lit up. $90,000. The bidding war lasted 90 seconds. It took 90 seconds to undo 30 years of sentimental attachment. I appreciated the economy of it. $115,000, the auctioneer called. $118,000. Fair warning. The hammer fell with a sharp crack. Sold for $118,000. People shook my hand and offered professional courtesies. I accepted them all. My passenger seat stayed empty on the drive home, but my phone started screaming. It was Beulah. I let it go to voicemail. Then Thaddeus called. Voicemail. Beulah called a third time. I pulled over on a quiet street and stared at the screen. My thumb moved toward the answer button, but then a text message flashed from Zenobia. It was a screenshot of the Sotheby's auction results newsletter. Lot 47, $118,000. Below it, Zenobia had typed, Beulah, your dad's painting sold for how much? Another buzz followed. Beulah had meant to text Thaddeus, but sent it to the group chat instead. That was my painting, she wrote. He stole my Christmas gift. 5 more calls hit my phone in 10 seconds. The screen lit up like a Christmas tree. I turned it off and started the engine. The war had officially begun. Morning light hit my coffee cup just right the next day. It was a Limoges circa 1875 with a tiny hairline crack on the handle. It was number 83 in my collection. I was writing in my journal, documenting the provenance of a new acquisition, when a door slammed downstairs. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, fast and angry. I set down my pen. The studio door flew open and Beulah stood there, her face a mask of pure rage. She clutched her phone like a weapon. $118,000, she screamed. I did not look up from my journal. Good morning to you too. Don't you good morning me, Beulah yelled. You sold my painting. Interesting interpretation, I said, keeping my pen steady. Thaddeus appeared behind her, breathing hard. Corn, we need to talk seriously about what you did. I finally looked up and met his eyes. What I did was sell my property. Beulah's hands shook as she thrust the phone toward me. The screenshot of the auction results was glowing. That was my Christmas gift. You can't just take back a gift. You refused it, I said. You called it garage sale trash, if memory serves. I did not refuse it, Beulah cried. I just said it wasn't my style. I stood up and walked to my desk. I pulled up the transaction receipt on my computer and turned the screen toward her. You suggested I donate it to Goodwill, Beulah. Those were your exact words. Thaddeus stepped closer, his eyes locked on the numbers. You are twisting things. You know what she meant. I know precisely what she meant, I said, my voice staying level. 40 years of dealing with difficult clients taught me how to recognize contempt. I have supported the two of you for 3 years, rent-free groceries, utilities. If I am mentally declining, perhaps I should have stopped that generosity back in 2022. Beulah's expression shifted instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by a thin veil of fake concern. Look, Dad, let's be reasonable. You made a profit, a big one. We think Beulah deserves compensation. Compensation for what exactly? I asked. For my gift, Beulah said. Half of that money is mine. It stopped being yours the moment you rejected it, I told her, legally, ethically, and morally. Thaddeus crossed his arms. We could get a lawyer involved. Please do, I smiled. I will enjoy that conversation. Beulah's eyes narrowed. She tried a different tactic. Why are you being so difficult? Are you okay, Dad? Mentally. Making big financial decisions alone at your age is a lot. At my age, which is 70, not 90, I replied. We are just worried about you, Thaddeus said, selling valuable things impulsively like this. I walked over to the sink and poured my cold coffee down the drain. Some conversations deserve fresh beans. This one deserved nothing. The only impulsive decision I made was thinking you would appreciate beauty over price tags, I said. You are being financially irresponsible, Thaddeus snapped. Senile, honestly. Something snapped inside me. Senile. I stood up, and they both took a step back. I have supported you for 3 years. I have given you a home. And you dare call me senile because I sold my own art? Get out. I pointed to the door. My hand was shaking, not from age, but from a rage I had kept bottled for too long. There are things in this house 10 times more valuable than that painting, I said, and you will never. I stopped myself. The words hung in the air like a heavy mist. Beulah's eyes changed. They sharpened, calculating and cold. 10 times more valuable, she whispered. Out now, I said. Both of you. They left, but Beulah threw one last look around the studio, her eyes cataloging every frame and folder. The door closed. I sat back down and stared at my coffee cup collection. 127 pieces of 19th century porcelain. Some were worth thousands, but most were worth sentiment. I picked up my phone and called my son Lemuel in Tokyo. "Dad, what happened?" he asked as soon as he answered. "Your sister discovered I sold the painting," I said. "I made a strategic error, Lemuel. I let my temper slip and told them there was more treasure in this house." "I'll handle it," Lemuel said, his face full of concern. "Do you want me to fly home?" "No," I told him. "Stay with your family. But I need you to know something about your inheritance." We talked for 20 minutes about plans and protection. When the call ended, I pulled a business card from my desk drawer. Sid Parker, attorney at law. We had known each other for 30 years. "Cornelius," Sid said on the second ring. "Been a while." "I need advice," I said. "Estate planning. My daughter is living in my house rent-free, and I am reconsidering my generosity. I need to protect my assets from people who see me as an ATM with a pulse." "When can you come to the office?" Sid asked. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I said. "I'll bring the documentation." I walked downstairs after the call, past the antique portrait of my great-grandmother Cornelia. The gold frame was dark, the oils were stern. I noticed the desk drawer in the hallway was not quite closed. I opened it. Everything looked normal, but I knew my organization. Someone had been through it. There were fresh scratches around the lock of the filing cabinet. I straightened the portrait of Cornelia. It was slightly crooked. They are looking for treasure, I thought. I pulled out my phone and typed a note. Phase 1 complete. They have taken the bait. Upstairs, I could hear muffled voices through the ceiling. Thaddeus was speaking. If that painting was worth over $100,000, what else is he hiding? The next morning, documents covered Sid Parker's desk, property deeds, bank statements, and 3 years of utility bills. I had grocery receipts organized in neat chronological order. Sid whistled low as he looked through the spreadsheets. "You have been documenting everything, Cornelius," he said. "Force of habit," I replied. 40 years of provenance verification makes you careful." Sid ran his finger down the columns. $2,800 a month for rent equivalent, $400 for utilities, $600 for groceries. Multiply that by 36 months. He looked up at me. "You are owed $87,000, give or take." "I don't want the money," I said. "I want them to understand what they threw away, and I want my house back." Sid leaned back in his leather chair. His office smelled of old books and wood paneling. "You want to formalize these as loans?" "I want to establish that I have been generous," I said. "And when I stop being generous, I want the law on my side. I am documenting reality." "If they are going through your things, you should know about it," Sid said. "Put up security cameras. It is your house. It is completely legal." The idea felt invasive, but Sid was right. They were already invading my privacy. I agreed to start with one in my studio. When I got home, they had already started their hunt. Security footage I checked later showed Beulah photographing a Remington sculpture on the mantle. It was a bronze cowboy worth maybe $8,000. She took photos from 6 different angles and uploaded them immediately. Thaddeus was in the hallway, measuring a Chinese vase with a magnifying glass. It was a Ming reproduction that had cost me $300 at a gallery closing, but it was the portrait that obsessed them. Great-grandmother Cornelia. It had been hanging in the living room for 4 years. By Thursday, I had 6 hours of footage of Thaddeus trying to pick my desk lock with a paperclip while watching a YouTube tutorial. I could have given him the key, but watching him fail was more educational. On January 20th, I had another video call with Lemuel. "Dad, this sounds serious," he said. "Beulah and Thaddeus have debts I never knew about," I told him. "They are desperate. They see this house as an inheritance worth fighting for." "What can I do?" Lemuel asked. "I want to transfer 50% ownership of the house to you," I said. "It is strategic. If Beulah tries to have me declared incompetent to claim my assets, you will have an equal say as a co-owner." "She wouldn't do that," Lemuel whispered. "She called me senile 3 days ago," I said. Lemuel was silent for a long time. "What do you need me to sign?" On January 23rd, the documents were notarized and filed. Lemuel owned half the house, which technically made him Beulah's landlord. I decided to keep that surprise for later. On January 27th, I went to a gallery opening to give them a window. Security footage from that night showed Thaddeus alone in my office, systematically checking files. He found the Christie's folder I had left out. He pulled out a letter from 1998, a professional appraisal for an 18th century portrait. The estimated value was $800,000 to $1.2 million. Thaddeus did not read the second page, which stated the portrait had been sold in 2005 to buy this very house. He only saw the valuation. His hands shook as he photographed the paper and ran to find Bula. I watched their silent conversation on the monitor. Bula's eyes went wide. She grabbed the phone and read the text 3 times. Then they both turned and stared at the portrait of Cornelia hanging on the wall. They thought they had found their gold mine. The portrait was a fake. It had cost me $200 in 2020. I had left the folder there deliberately to keep them busy, though I hadn't expected them to jump on that specific letter so fast. On January 28th, I sat in my studio at midnight watching the footage. I saw Bula in my office laughing. She looked like she did when she was 8 years old on a treasure hunt. She had found a silver dollar I had hidden back then and hugged me, calling it the best birthday ever. I paused the video on her laughing face. "What happened to you?" I whispered. I almost called her. I almost offered to help with her debts and find a path forward. But then the video resumed. Bula opened my desk drawer and removed my late wife's jewelry box. It was costume jewelry with only sentimental value. She photographed it and put it back. No, I thought. You made your choice. On January 30th, I came home from dinner and found the portrait of Cornelia crooked again. I straightened it and noticed a sticky note tucked into the edge of the frame. It was Bula's handwriting. "Get appraised," it said. 18th century, up to 1.2 million. Do not touch. I smiled. They had taken the bait. My phone rang a moment later. It was an unknown number. "Mr. Harrison? This is Gerald Chen from Heritage Auction House. We received an inquiry about your 18th century portrait. The caller said she was your daughter, authorized to seek a valuation." The game had changed. They were no longer just hunting. They were trying to sell my property while I was still breathing. The next morning, Bula appeared in the kitchen with a tray of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast that was not burnt. I looked up from the newspaper, surprised. "Good morning, Dad," she said with a voice I hadn't heard since she was 12. "What is the occasion?" I asked. "No occasion," she smiled. "Can't a daughter make her father breakfast?" I took a bite. The eggs were folded properly. "You remembered the technique," I noted. "I remember a lot of things, Dad," she said. "We should talk more about the past, about preserving memories." Bula made me breakfast for 3 days straight. I hadn't seen this much care from her since she was in the womb. The eggs were competent, but the motives were transparent. Thaddeus, meanwhile, had suddenly discovered a passion for art history. The man who called my collection clutter now wanted to discuss period framing. "Corn, I've been thinking," Thaddeus said, appearing in the living room. "That portrait of Cornelia. Have you ever had it appraised for insurance?" "I know what it is worth," I said over my glasses. "Sure, but officially?" He nodded too many times. "You wouldn't want anything to happen to it." He pronounced Providence wrong 4 times in one conversation. I did not correct him. On Friday night, I cooked a family dinner. I made roasted chicken and garlic potatoes. They actually showed up on time. "Tell us about great-great-grandmother Cornelia," Bula said, leaning forward. I set down my fork and sighed. Cornelia Duchamp Harrison, born in Paris, 1765, minor nobility. She sat for 3 months for that portrait. The artist's name is lost to history, but the technique is remarkable. Thaddeus stopped chewing. 3 months? That must have been expensive. "It has been in our family for 7 generations, I said. "My father wouldn't allow it to be sold. Some things are more valuable than money." They exchanged a quick, greedy glance. Later that week, I was in Sid's office signing a new will and museum donation agreements. "You are really doing this?" Sid asked. "They will lose their minds," I said. "That is the idea." The next morning, I met with Patricia Morales at the Canyon Road Museum. She smelled of coffee and old paper. She was thrilled with the donation. "The piece is perfect for our 1890s exhibition," she said, looking at the photos I brought. The fake looked excellent in the pictures. "We will name the gallery hall after your family, the Harrison Room." That night at dinner, I touched the frame of the portrait reverently, as if saying goodbye. Thaddeus watched my hand like a cat watching a laser pointer. "Beautiful piece," he said. "Irreplaceable," I replied. It was technically true. You can't replace something that was never valuable. The reproduction had cost me $200. I went to my studio later and locked the door. I moved to the back corner and pulled a cloth away from a large canvas leaning against the wall. The real portrait emerged. Luminous skin tones, genuine 18th century technique, the actual Cornelia painted in 1789. On the back was the original certificate of authenticity and a museum transfer agreement I had signed in 2020. I had a sticky note on it, "To be revealed after my death." Let them enjoy the fake, I thought. I looked at my phone, which showed the living room camera. They were in their bedroom, and their voices were carrying through the vents. "He gave it away," Thaddeus hissed. "He mentioned preserving it because it's worth a fortune, and then he just gave it away." Bula's voice was high with excitement. "He is sentimental. We need a plan. That portrait should come to me. I am the only child here. We need to be in the will properly," Thaddeus said. "We keep being perfect, devoted, indispensable." I walked away from the vent and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed with a text from Sid. The museum donation was official as of tomorrow. The next evening, I set 6 place settings with the good china and crystal glasses. Bula entered and stopped dead. "Dad, this is beautiful," she said. "What is the occasion?" "A family meeting," I said. "An important announcement about my estate." She practically vibrated with greed. The doorbell rang, and I opened it for Sid Parker. Bula's smile froze. Dinner was cordially tense. After the main course, I stood up with my glass raised. "I have made a decision about Cornelia's portrait," I said. "I am donating it to the Canyon Road Museum. The papers are signed." Silence hit the room. Bula's wine glass tilted, and Sid caught it before it spilled. "You are what?" Thaddeus asked. His face turned a deep, angry purple. It was like watching a sunset of financial devastation. "Dad, wait," Bula cracked. "That portrait has been in our family for generations." "Exactly why it belongs in a museum," I said, "for proper preservation." "But it's your property," Bula cried. "I have made my decision," I said. Bula's teeth were gritted so hard I worried for her dental work. "So generous, Dad," she strangled out. "The museum is naming the gallery after us," I told them. "The Harrison Room. Our name will be immortalized." Thaddeus pushed back his chair. "The name? That is the important thing, not the value." I retired early and listened to the house. At 10 p.m., their bedroom door slammed. "He gave away $1 million, Thaddeus yelled. "That was our retirement, our house fund. It was never yours," Bula sobbed. "This is your fault," Thaddeus screamed. "You said being nice would work." I closed my eyes. My revenge was working perfectly. I wondered why I felt so cold. My phone rang suddenly. It was an unknown number. "Mr. Harrison? This is attorney Morton Fisher. I represent your daughter Beulah. We need to discuss your recent donation and your mental competency to make such decisions." The word incompetent hung in the air like a thick, suffocating smoke. I set my coffee cup down with a steady hand, though my chest felt tight. Sid Parker's voice on the other end of the line was sharp and urgent, telling me that the process server would arrive within the hour. Through the kitchen window, I saw Beulah's car sitting in the driveway like a predator waiting for its prey. Thaddeus was by the trunk, his eyes darting toward my front door. They were watching and waiting to see the look on my face when my own daughter tried to strip me of my life's work. The doorbell rang exactly 40 minutes later. The young man standing there looked apologetic as he handed me a thick envelope. I opened it right there on the porch. "Petition for guardianship and conservatorship." The words were a list of insults, advanced age-affecting judgment, impulsive financial decisions, and vulnerability to exploitation. I looked up and caught Beulah watching me from her bedroom window. I didn't yell. I didn't wave. I simply met her eyes and mouthed the word war. Sid arrived shortly after, spreading the legal papers across my kitchen table. He pointed to the sections where they used the museum donation as evidence of my failing mind. They claimed I didn't know the value of what I was giving away. I told Sid that I had planned that donation for 5 years, but it didn't matter what the truth was to them. They were lying to get the money, and they were willing to make it public. My voice was hard when I told Sid to let the world see what she had become. 3 days later, I found myself in the office of Dr. Sharon Margolis. The room smelled of lavender and textbooks, a soft environment for a brutal interrogation. For 3 hours, she poked at my brain with questions that felt like insults. She asked me what year it was and who the president was. I gave her the answers, though I asked if we really had to discuss politics. Then, she asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. 100, 93, 86, 79, 72, 65, 58. I didn't miss a beat. The most ridiculous moment came when she handed me a piece of paper and asked me to draw a clock. I am a man who spent 40 years authenticating the brushstrokes of old masters, and here I was drawing a circle and 12 numbers to prove I wasn't senile. I drew it like a dolly, the numbers melting off the side. The doctor didn't laugh. Psychiatrists rarely do, but I passed her test anyway. She noted that my anger was a rational response to a child trying to steal my autonomy. While I was fighting for my dignity, Thaddeus was busy hiring a shadow. He brought in a budget detective named Frank Morris for $200 a day. They targeted the museum, finding a junior curator named Marcus Chen who was drowning in $50,000 of debt. For $2,000 in cash, Marcus snuck into the museum after hours and examined the portrait I had donated. He reported back that it was a reproduction, worth maybe $300 with the frame. Thaddeus didn't understand the truth. He didn't realize I had given them a worthless fake on purpose. Instead, his greedy mind spun a new conspiracy. He believed I had swapped the paintings, giving the museum a fake while I kept the real $1,000,000 masterpiece hidden in the house. Their desperation grew, and with it, their recklessness. On March the 1st, my studio door flew open once again. Beula's face was the color of a ripe tomato, her breath coming in short, jagged bursts. "We know what you did," she screamed. She accused me of defrauding the museum and hiding the real portrait. Thaddeus stepped forward, his voice low and threatening, asking where I had hidden the gold. I sat there and watched them, realizing that they were so blinded by greed they were now chasing ghosts. Their lawyer, Morton Fisher, called later that afternoon. He used a voice that sounded like cheap gravel, claiming they had evidence of my erratic behavior. I told him my judgment was excellent, but his choice in taking this case was questionable. I hung up and sat in the silence of my studio, surrounded by my things. I looked at old photo albums, seeing Beula at age 3 with a paintbrush in her hand and a gap-toothed smile. I wondered where that little girl had gone. I typed a message to her, asking to talk about us instead of money, but I deleted it before sending. The line between justice and cruelty was starting to blur. The morning paper brought the public shame I had feared. There it was on page 7 of the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local art expert facing a competency challenge from his own family. My name was there for everyone to see. The phone started ringing almost immediately. Gallery owners, collectors, and people I had worked with for decades were calling to express their outrage and support. The social consequences for Beula and Thaddeus were swifter than the legal ones. Zenobia Wallace called Beula to tell her she couldn't support a daughter suing her own father, then hung up. Within 3 days, their social circle evaporated. Invitations to dinner were withdrawn, and people avoided them in the aisles of the grocery store. Santa Fe is a small town, and word of their betrayal spread like a fever. On the evening of March the 1st, a news van from Channel 7 pulled into the street. A reporter with a microphone was waiting at the end of my driveway. I could have stayed inside, but I chose to walk out. I stood in the camera light and gave them a statement. I told the reporter I had passed my evaluation because I wasn't incompetent. I was just done being used. I told the world that I had supported my daughter's family for 3 years, while they called my gifts trash and sued me for greed. The reaction was a tidal wave. My phone erupted with texts from Lemuel and calls from the judge's clerk. The hearing was scheduled for March 10th. I had 10 days to prepare for the final confrontation. I went back to my studio and locked the door, pulling out the folder that contained 3 years of receipts, bank transfers, and medical bills. I started scanning them all. If they wanted a war, I was going to give them the cold, hard truth. When the morning of March 10th arrived, I was ready. I wore my charcoal suit and a burgundy bow tie, sitting in the living room with my briefcase beside me. I was waiting for Sid, but the phone rang first. Fisher had withdrawn the petition an hour ago. They were claiming new information made a resolution outside of court preferable. It was a lie. They simply knew they were going to lose and lose badly. Through the window, I saw Bula's car pull into the driveway. They weren't coming to the front door, though. I watched them walk around the side of the house toward the back. I followed them silently, my phone recording as a locksmith they had hired picked the lock to my studio. I stood in the doorway and watched them rifle through my private files. "Looking for something?" I asked. They spun around, their faces pale with shock. Bula stammered that I was supposed to be at court, and the locksmith realized he had been lied to about having permission to be there. He left in a hurry, leaving Bula and Thaddeus alone with me. Bula demanded to know where the real portrait was, screaming that I was playing games. I told her there was no real portrait, and I invited them into the living room to end this once and for all. I spread the documents across the coffee table. I showed them the Christie's appraisal from 1998, and then I showed them the sale record from 2005. I had sold that portrait 20 years ago to buy the very house they were standing in. The portrait in the museum was a reproduction I had commissioned in 2020 because I liked the image. Bula sat down hard, the weight of her own foolishness finally crushing her. They had torn through my life looking for hidden millions that didn't exist. I pulled out my spreadsheet and read the numbers aloud. Rent, utilities, groceries, credit card minimums, and medical bills. The total was 87,132. Entitlement. I looked Bula in the eye and reminded her of what she had said on Christmas morning. Garage sale trash. "You set us up," she sobbed. I told her I had simply wanted her to appreciate what she had, but she chose to hunt for what she didn't. My voice rose with the first real anger I had let show. I told them I was done. I told them they had 2 weeks to find a new home. When Thaddeus tried to argue that I couldn't evict them, I showed them the truth about the house. Lemuel owned half of it, and he wanted them gone. Sid entered with the official eviction notice. Bula collapsed into tears, asking what they were supposed to do. I told her it wasn't my problem anymore. Every choice had been hers, and every consequence was earned. I told her I didn't even owe her my forgiveness. "You are no longer welcome in my home," I said. 48 hours. The 48 hours passed in a blur of packing and resentment. I watched from my window as a small rental truck was loaded with their belongings. It was a much smaller load than when they had arrived 3 years ago. Everything truly valuable in that house was staying with me. I saw Braxton and Kelafina sitting on the porch steps, far too quiet for children. Bula looked physically reduced, as if the greed had been the only thing keeping her upright. The doorbell rang one last time before they left. It was Bula, alone, her face raw from crying. I opened the door and let her into the study. She told me she had been a terrible daughter and that everything I said was true. She admitted to the hunting, the suing, and the waiting for me to die. She confessed that she had poisoned herself with the idea that I owed her something just because I was comfortable, and she wasn't. I sat and listened as she told me she didn't recognize the person she had become. She told me she didn't expect forgiveness. I told her I didn't want her apologies. I told her she had seen price tags on me instead of a father. But because she was there and acknowledging the truth, something Thaddeus would never do, I told her the $87,000 debt was canceled. I didn't want the money. I wanted her to remember that family had supported her when no one else would. However, the house remained mine. I told her I didn't forgive her yet, and I might never, but I didn't hate her either. She was my daughter, and that was a fact that wouldn't change. She broke down and thanked me for not hating her. She told me they were moving to a small apartment Lemuel had helped find. As she walked to the door, she asked if she would ever see me again. I told her I didn't know. Time would tell. The truck drove away, and I didn't wave. Lemuel arrived from Tokyo that afternoon, and we sat on the terrace together. He told me I had done the right thing and that I had taught Bula the most important lesson of her life. I asked him about the collection, the real one. It was in a bank vault, 3 paintings worth $1.6 million. I told him they were his when I died. He told me he didn't want them, and I told him that was exactly why he was getting them. Bula had already received the most valuable thing I could give her, a lesson that couldn't be bought or sold. 6 months passed. My life became quieter and cleaner. I joined an art appreciation society and made friends who understood that art was about beauty, not an investment portfolio. My morning routine was mine again: yoga at 7, coffee at 8, and volunteering at the museum. Lemuel called twice a week, and he eventually brought his family to visit. We filled the guest rooms with new memories and the sound of grandchildren who called me Oji-san. I started painting again. They were terrible paintings, but they were mine, and they hung in my studio where no one could judge them. In mid-September, a postcard arrived from Bula. She had found work at a small interior design firm. She wrote that she was starting over and learning about value versus price. She thanked me for not giving up on her by giving up completely. She ended the card by saying that maybe someday we could talk. I stared at that postcard for a long time. I took a magnet and hung it on the refrigerator right next to a crayon drawing she had made when she was 8. I touched both cards and said nothing, but I didn't throw the postcard away. My life felt smaller and perhaps a bit lonelier, but it was mine. Justice and love don't always coexist, and I had chosen justice. I sit on my terrace most evenings now, watching the mountains turn purple and then gold. There is silence, and there is peace. It isn't happiness yet. That will take time. But it is peace. I looked at the dark rectangle on the wall where the portrait used to hang, and I realized that the space it left behind was finally filled with something real. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.